Bonjour my little demon. For some of you, this might be the first time you hear my voice. So hi, I'm Leah, and the potato accent that you're about to hear in this video comes straight from France. I'm your French portrait artist, and I hope that you'll enjoy watching the process behind one of my proudest work, Solitude. To celebrate the New Year lunch happening this weekend, I asked you to vote for a drawing process, and you guys picked this wolf girl, so here it is. This video is your event reward, and yeah, it's going to be part processed, part chit-chat, and I'll walk you through my artistic approach, my thought process when designing this character, and just share a bit of what's going on behind the scenes. But before we start, let me make a quick announcement. My new portrait masterclass is finally live this weekend. Until Sunday, you can join Portrait for Meaning, a masterclass that took me over a year to craft, and it's all about artistic composition and portrait storytelling. Basically, it's my step-by-step process to help you master composition and finally find your own artistic voice. The goal here is really for you to move past just copying Pinterest references and start creating original, meaningful portraits that people actually feel and remember. In this course, I'll first teach you how to come up with captivating portrait backstories using my storytelling tools and character template. And then we will turn that backstory into strong visual elements for your portraits. So I'll make composition fundamentals such as light composition, character design, flow, and visual hierarchy super easy for you, and we will even do Old Masters analysis together to understand how to make deliberate artistic choice for your portraits. And I'm really proud to release this new course because I put all my energy and passion into it. And it was really important to me because being a true artist is not just about, mastering the technical side of portraits. It's also about being able to make deliberate artistic choices and finding your own unique voice. But no one really tells you that this isn't something you're just born with. It's really something that you can learn. And I had no idea at first, and I used to struggle, I was always feeling stuck in my art and feeling limited. And that's also why I'm so proud that after years of research, studying, and trial and errors, I'm now ready to share my way of creating meaning in my portraits with you. And also during this weekend, you'll have the opportunity to join my best-selling course, Reality to Fantasy. It's my stylized portrait shortcut. And if Portrait for Meaning is all about the artistic side of drawing portraits, Reality to Fantasy is all about the technical side of drawing crazy stylized portraits. So yeah, I hope that you're as excited as I am. I've put so much effort into this celebration weekend, and I really hope that you'll be there to read my emails, watch the videos, and get that little boost for your portrait journey in 2025. And for the most motivated, I hope that you'll join my tribe of more than 600 students and let me be your mentor. That's all for the announcement. Now let's dive into how I created this wolf girl. Let's go. So I didn't record it, but the first step of my process for this wolf girl was to just do some mark making. I used very light lines to simply map out the drawing and basic proportions of my character. And now what you see on the screen is me working on the line work. As you can see, I'm being really deliberate with my strokes. I'm really thinking about creating texture for the hair and showing volume, and it's not about going fast. I'm really trying to use a minimum amount of lines to show a maximum of information. And generally speaking, I am really slow as an artist because I value observing the references a lot and really thinking about each line before actually drawing it. And that's how I managed to develop a clean style. Moving on to the flowers, again, I'm being really deliberate with my lines, and also I used to damage my paper a lot because I was too messy. So I really practice how to make deliberate lines and really think of the lines before I actually draw it. That's why here you can see that I'm really slow because actually I'm trying to figure because actually I'm trying to figure out the line before drawing it. And this is what helps me get, such a clean and professional rendering at the end of the day. Now you can see me drawing the flowers, and when I draw intricate elements like flowers, I always start with basic shapes. I don't go into the details as soon as possible. I really try to first keep it really basic, and then once I set up the basic shapes and the basic volumes, I gradually add more details, and it's really a gradual process from general to detail. And also during the line work process, you'll see me often indicate some shadow areas, just really light wash of graphite, because it helps me design my shadows later on in the process, and it's just for me to remember the form that I'm trying to show. Moving on to the ornaments, you can see me draw a cycle, and honestly, spheres have always been for me the hardest form to draw. So I'm being really gentle and really focused right now in order to get a nice rounded shape. So if you struggle with getting, perfect rounds, perfect cycles, it's totally normal. It's because it's such a difficult form to draw because there is no angles, and the only tips that I can give you is to practice a lot. Like I used to do warm-ups of drawing rounds and rounds and rounds, and this helps with muscle memory. But at the end of the day, taking your time and being very light and gentle with your lines, this is the only way to get such a clean rendering and such a professional rendering, if I can say it like that. And I think you've probably noticed by now, but today's process is all about being gentle and being super calm. And honestly, it's kind of surprising, but my whole approach of a drawing or of a portrait really depends on my actual mood. Sometimes when I'm super excited or even angry or frustrated, my strokes get energetic and the result is completely different. But here I was feeling at peace and I was feeling really connected to the character's story. Her backstory is sad, she's in a state of solitude, so calm, flowing lines just felt right for the drawing. And I feel like no one really talks about how important it is to immerse yourself in the portrait you are trying to create, because the way you draw, like the rhythm of your lines, the pressure, the movement, it's all a direct reflection of your current state of mind, and it has such a huge impact on the final result. So being an artist is also about regulating your inner dialogue and learning to control it. Because if I had gone for super bold, energetic strokes for this story, the final rendering would have felt completely off and misleading. So yeah, this is something that no one really talks about, and I had to figure out myself. So I really suggest you to observe how you're feeling when you are actually drawing a portrait and try to control this state, because it's going to change the aspects of your lines. As you see me adding a bit of texture to the moon ornament, I want to take this opportunity to tell you more about how I created this character. Because sharing the drawing techniques is very interesting, but I think that art is also about the artistic decisions that you make in the process of creating. So I think that it's also really interesting to talk about it in this tutorial. So for every portrait project, I follow a specific process to develop a design, to develop an interesting character, and to develop a compelling composition that has a lot of visual impact. And these all methods, this whole step-by-step process that took me years to design, I detail it in my Portrait for Meaning masterclass, but here I want to share the main steps. So first, I start with a brainstorming practice to come up with personal ideas. It's really important to generate unique ideas that comes from your personal experience, because this is how you are going to make portraits that are unique and that stand out from the crowd, So after the So after the brainstorming practice, I take the time to refine the idea into an interesting portrait concept using specific criteria like narrative depth, visual contrast, directions, and so on. And this refining stage is super important because it helps me avoid cliché in my portraits. Next, I take the refined concept and build a full story around it. For that, I use storytelling tools like character archetypes, and I also have a template that I crafted myself with key questions that I use to, break down the story step by step and come up with a compelling story that is captivating and interesting to back up my portrait. And then this story, it's the foundation for everything that comes next, which is turning each element of the story into compelling visual elements. So to give you an example, this is the story I came up with after this whole process for the wolf girl. You can press pause to read it. So once I have a story like this, the second part of the process for meaning is to translate those ideas into impactful visual elements. So basically, it's like asking yourself how light can tell this specific story, or how the shapes I use, the position, the expressions, the accessories I choose can tell this specific story. And basically, I truly think that the goal of any portrait artist is to be able to turn their story, their unique view of the world, into impactful visuals. And this is what we call design and composition. So to answer this question, I have several tools like POV, flow, position, expression, light, shape language, and I go through several drafts and thumbnails to explore these tools and also to craft my story into a clear visual narrative for my portrait. So for example, this moon ornament that you can see me draw, I added them to symbolize how my character is deeply connected to her natural habitat. You can also see deliberate artistic decisions in the shape language I chose for this drawing. The overall silhouette is quite rounded, but the secondary shapes are more triangular. For example, you can see that in how I designed the hair. Here I'm mapping out sharp shapes, but I'm using smooth, clean and long lines. And it's all about understanding what a triangular shape means, for example, or what a long flowing line means, for example, and it's all about finding the right balance. So yeah, mastering visual elements like light, lines, flow, visual hierarchy, it's really key to a striking original portrait. It's really what you need and maybe what you miss when you want to create a piece that truly feels yours and not just a copy of a Pinterest reference. So if you want to master visual components like shape language, character design and light composition, I make this super easy in Portrait for Meaning. Once I'm done with the line work, I move on to the shading. And I think what makes my stylized portraits feel more organic and alive is the coexistence of realistic shading and stylized shading. Of course, for quick studies, for example, I go for full stylized shading using hatching techniques because, it's just quick and more energetic. But for a more sophisticated project like this one, I prefer to include soft, rich, blended areas like you can see right now on the flower. And I like to mix it with light stylized hatching in other parts. And it took me quite a lot of experimentation to find the right balance between, smooth, blended areas and strong, impactful hatching techniques. And honestly, I think it's a lifelong journey. I'm still experimenting with this balance. But playing with both realistic and stylized shading really helped me find a unique style and this unique balance. And I think finding your own style is all about experimenting on how much you want to stick to realism or how much you want to break the rules of realism. And as I move to the face, you'll see that I will mix both blended shading and hatching techniques in the same area. I start with a smooth, more realistic shading to build the foundation of the face and the expression, and then on top of that smooth foundation, I will add some hatching and some stylization. Because if I go full stylization, I feel like I lose some of the organic quality and, this subtlety in my character's expression. But of course, some artists do an incredible job with, getting that organic feel with just hatching and cross-hatching techniques. For example, Michelangelo was a master of cross-hatching, and if you see his drawings, it's just amazing. But this is just my personal preference, and this is how I develop my own style. So I thought that it would be cool to share it with you. And the takeaway of that is really to experiment. You don't have to stick to, realism or stylization. You have so many options in between that you can experiment, so don't hesitate and just take your time to, enjoy the process of experimenting several styles, and yeah. Now moving on to the shading of the fluffy ears. Here I'm really trying to focus on getting a nice texture. I'm also playing with the whites, the contrast between some completely blank areas and others that are textured and shaded. And this really helps me balance the visual weight of the wolf's ears in this composition, because if I shaded them too much, they could overpower the face and weaken the character's expression. Since the ears are already large and attention-grabbing, I keep the shading really minimal, just enough to suggest texture but nothing more. And since the ears are already large and attention-grabbing, I choose to keep the shading minimal, just enough to suggest texture but nothing more. And as I'm shading the little moons, it's a great opportunity to walk you through my shading process. Because this is a question that I get a lot, and I think you guys are really interested in how to build a rich, convincing shading. So yeah, this is something that I cover in detail in my course Reality to Fantasy, but I want to share the key steps with you here so you can start implementing it right now. So I always start with a light and shadow separation stage. I like doing this before rendering because it helps me design the shadow shapes first, and then once those areas are mapped out, I can move on to building depth within the shadows and refining the values step by step. It really helps me to break down the process into more manageable steps, and also light and shadow separation stage helps me, step into the rendering process without being too overwhelmed. So you can see here in the video that I'm building the shading in layers. I'm not going dark right away, I'm slowly building up the texture and shadow depth layer by layer. And this patience is really what creates rich texture shading, and there's really no shortcut for this. I had to, learn it the hard way because I was so impatient and I was always rushing the process, and I didn't understand why my shading was so flat. And it's because I was going too dark too soon. It's really important to go layer by layer and build that richness, that texture, that depth, layer by layer. And after that, you see me move on to the light areas. I'm trying to build, texture, but I'm trying to stay as light as possible. And this process really helps me to break down rendering into manageable steps and achieve a shading style that feels both organic and stylized. And yeah, this is the process that helps me break down rendering into manageable steps. And it also helped me achieve a shading style that feels both organic and stylized. And basically, I applied this exact same process to everything I have to shade in my portraits. For example, I find it super helpful for shading the hair of my characters. It helps me break down this super tedious and super complicated process into more manageable steps, and it helps me end up with some impressive rendering. So when the outline is done, I start rendering, and my process actually only has 3 steps. First, I apply a mid-tone all over the hair, and I use this opportunity to enhance the flow and the big chunks that I created with the outline. Then I build the shadows, and here I'm focusing on adding texture, hatching in the same direction of the chunk flow. And finally, I add the highlights. With my pencil eraser, I'm also trying to add more texture. And you can see that you can get quite an impressive rendering with just 3 steps. And of course, it's not hyper realistic, but for stylized portraits, it's already an overkill. So voila, this is my easy process. So at this stage of the process, I'm almost done with, this portrait. So my last piece of advice is about the overall harmony of the portrait. And it's really important to understand that the darkest areas naturally grab more attention. So when I'm shading, I really try to create key points of really, really dark areas to guide the viewer's eye. And this is super important because this creates a visual hierarchy in your portrait and it helps people experience your portrait in the right order. For example, here's how I approached it for the wolf girl. You probably don't really see it in the video because of the graphite shine, but the eyes and the mouth are the darkest area in the portrait and it immediately draws attention to her sad expression. This is the first thing I want people to experience in the portrait. Then you have the ornaments, so the moons and flowers, and these are the second darkest area and they are here to hint at her story and her connection to nature. And finally, you have the ear tips and the hair tips, and they are here to help balance the portrait visually and add to the overall style. So I guess that my final insight is to be really intentional with your darkest areas because they play such a huge role in how people experience your work. And I really think that this is the responsibility of every artist in their portraits to create a visual hierarchy that is clear and that will help the viewer experience the portrait in the right order. And I feel like no one really talks about it, so I really try to give you some insight about, tips and, behind the scenes decisions that artists make, but don't necessarily share. Because, I am a self-taught artist and finding all this information is really hard. So if I can make it available for you, I will. At least this is what I'm trying to do. And voila. This was the process video for my portrait Solitude, and I hope that you enjoyed it. It was definitely a challenge to turn a 4-hour process into a 20-minute video while keeping it useful and entertaining for you. But I hope that you liked it. Don't hesitate to send me your feedback and areas of improvement by email. I hope to make more videos like this one in the future. Remember, this weekend will be packed with emails, rewards, and exclusive videos, so I hope to see you there, whether you are looking for a boost in your portraits, motivation, inspiration, or thinking about joining my courses. I'm here for you. Don't hesitate to ask me your question by emails. I will do my best to respond as fast as possible. See you soon, and meet me tomorrow in your inbox. Bye!